You know, like cloud, it's supposed to just see, like, it's supposed to indicate the window of the train. We had no idea it was a train at all. Sounds like that's something clearly described.
The only thing I can add is one thing I didn't do this before, but I do now, is when I first read through it, next to the page number, will write, because most plots nowadays are broken down already, so I'll put down the intended panel numbers that the writer gives me. Because I've had a couple instances where, see, I'm an old novel reader, so I like reading. And so especially when I get into that zone where you're reading something and you can imagine it already. But I've gotten to situations where I've read a good scene and I really like the scene and I'm really charged about the scene and it's like page 15 and I go through the rest of it and I start drawing it and I get to page 15, oh yeah, my favorite scene, and it's 20 panels. And you know, so if there's time up front, you could probably talk to the writer and scoot over some panels and stuff like that. So now I just write down the numbers so that I have a good idea that, oh, I might get squished here.
Would you find yourself sometimes getting a book that had a page that has too many panels and you're compressing, but finding better ways to do it, or do you stick to the script as it's written? Well, so we just talk about that, how do you approach that?
I take it as a challenge, but as a caveat, I've been finding a lot of editors now are actually then, you know, suggesting to me, oh, you know, why don't we make this panel a bigger one? You know, so
We'll take a picture while you talk, so don't be thrown off at all. Could you guys just we'll send this over.
one thing I miss, which you know, surprised Ron, is that I'm finding, I don't know about you, I'm finding less and less times where there's actually time to talk to the writer than compared to before. I don't know, I guess it might be an old fogey here talking.
I mean, it's definitely not like it used to be.
Yeah.
The editors are more of a firewall between you in some cases, unless you happen to know the person before.
I have a pretty good relationship with Jason, but it hasn't, it's not always like that. I mean, when I worked on Spider-Man, I once heard a peep from Jason from this at all, even at all. You know, that one below, which I found a little bizarre. Then I actually, it was funny because I contributed a script idea for them. One of the issues, and there was a whole, actually, I had submitted it for a whole story, like 2 issues. And when I got the next script, it was that whole story. And they never heard anything from it, but it was a story I heard.
And you know, that's important, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little like, hey, you know, it was good. Casada kind of wrote me, said, oh, you know, I should, you know, come up with a lot of story ideas and get credit for it and stuff. I said, yeah, but no, I've never spoken to this guy. You know, so it's a little different.
You know, it's really different because I remember when I did my first, I think, X Factor, my first X book. And I was Joe Schmo from The Punisher, from Carl's office at the church. And Louise Simonson was, you know, Wheezy, you know, it was like Elvis, one name, you know, Wheezy. You know, and it's attached to Walter, you know. So, Anne Nocenti gave me Wheezy's number. No, she called up Wheezy, and Wheezy called me up, you know, Joe Schmo, right? And her first question to me was, so what do you like to draw, Willis? You know, so she figures, yeah, no, I started talking about Japanese girls. So, and she pulls out ninjas and stuff like that. And so we start this. I'm pretty happy with, you know, great story arc about, you know, cyber ninjas and stuff like that. And the full thought was, if she could pull out, extract out of me something I'm interested, that she might be interested too, at least if we come out with a crappy story, it's something that we're both happy with, you know, so we have a better chance of actually getting something good as opposed to, here's this plot, See you in 4 weeks.
So lucky, I get writers who send me scripts that they assume that I like drawing thousands of characters in costumes. And
They
you're
project
mistaking
their
yourself.
desires. So true.
I had a funny thing when I was working on some Tom Strong issues, and I was intimidated by Alan Moore, and his scripts were, just terrific, but extremely detailed. And I worked up the nerve to call him. I'm just kind of a little bit shy in a situation like that. I finally worked up the nerve to call him just to say, okay, I'm gonna break the ice, I'm gonna have a little conversation with him. And no, the first words out of his mouth was, "Oh, Jerry, yes, script is coming your way right away, right away." And he just kind of rushed me off the phone with the promise that script was coming, like I was calling him to bug him on the deadline. I was off the phone before. I was like, wait a minute, I didn't get a chance to talk to the guy. So I didn't call him back either because I felt like I was obviously pressuring him.
Well, that leads to a really good question, which is, what do you guys like when you get a script in? There's obviously things that you don't like. What do you like to see in your scripts? And it may be
To draw stuff and not have the pages that have 7 or 10 panels on them. They were saying about, like, I get a lot of stuff now from writers who'll write something, they'll have a description of probably 10 things on the page that you're supposed to fit in, but it'll say after, like a big couple of paragraphs, it'll say, and for the big panel, do this. And when I read that, all I'm thinking about is, okay, how is the dialogue going to fit into this? And unfortunately, working full script versus plot style forces me into a smaller panel mode, rather than if I was working plot style, I figure the writer's going to adjust to what space I give them so you can do the big panel.
And don't you hate it when they don't follow the script?
Right.
You give them the space and then they don't.
Or, you have to work out the different mechanics.
I'm of the firm belief that, and I told Jason this not long ago, I said, you guys need to at least, just as a prerequisite, try to draw one of your scripts before you get a job. Because they don't even really, sometimes I don't think understand that, even they're writing all this stuff on a little page, but it's a whole different thing on an 11 by 17 blank piece of paper where you're limited by its, by the dimensions of it, and, but your imagination can go everywhere, but you're trying to siphon it out into this little panel, and they just.
But if they do it in a plot form, then at least you can adjust it, and then they have a pass at it. But when it's full script,
It's like,
Spider-Man walks in the door, makes toast, sits on the couch, makes a phone call. There's all these type of things that you
And it's
really
very-
have to pick
yeah.
one of those actions. You can't really.
it's especially maddening on a team book when you've got, I did JLA with Kurt Busiek, and my God, I've never wanted that. Nothing against Kurt, he's a fine writer. It's just, man, oh man, and he was pulling characters out of his ass that I've never heard before, like Rainbow Raiders, and what the hell is this? And I'm trying to find ways to fit these guys in these panels, and then this guy's got to be on the left because he's saying this, and the right, and the guy over here on the right, and there's Wonder Woman soaring through the middle, you just sit there and stare at it, and you curse them for a while, and then you just start laying figures down, and you do turn into a zombie. You just like, at the end of the day, you're just like, so shot mentally. Because I was telling Andy Kubert this today, I was like, I don't think people also understand how much we are required to actually draw, as opposed to any, artists in general, paint, or whatever it is they do. A comic book artist is required to do so many things and know how to do them well, and it's a very daunting thing, so.
Sometimes you have to design characters on the fly too. If you're in the middle of a story, character shows up, it could be a continued character. You don't know that, so you always put your best foot forward, but a lot of times there's not extra time to do stuff in advance, like at the beginning of the issue or before your deadline is forward.
We sound like we're just a bunch of bitches.
See, the thing is, when I wrote stuff, I wrote for a lot of years, and I wrote for other artists, I wrote stuff for my own self. I was always really sympathetic to what you could put into a page, and I always tried to go on the shy side. But I knew I did a couple issues of Hulk, and Ron was like really good at getting the main action that you
And
needed.
blowing off everything you wrote to my own.
But it was, you know what, that's part of the plot style thing is, seriously, you know, there's stuff that's gonna go by the wayside. It's not everything in there is important, but you throw it in there as a suggestion because stuff can happen in the background or whatever. But you do have to be sympathetic to what the visual is and the fact that people buy comics. You might buy it for your favorite writer, but if the drawing is boring or the approach is really dull, it makes for dull comics. You know, it can be written brilliantly, and it's just not going to visually sell it. And that's what I think a lot of people don't really get the balance.
Yeah, and its impact, I mean, you know, the visuals just, that's why there's certain artists who, you know, they have a bigger fan base based on their particular ability to put more bigger figures on the page with more detail, or as opposed to a storyteller, or, you know, I mean, there's guys out there now who do stuff that blow my mind. Well, these guys always blow my mind, but, you know, so, and I
Looking through the window.
I can't fathom it all. I won't go there. Blow. I don't want to get into that. So, anyway, there's just guys that I can't fathom how they get it on there. But I'm more of a storyteller.
Have you also noticed that since we're getting such easier access to Hollywood, that a lot of writers are writing down, you know, I grew up on Jack Kirby's Stan Lee, excuse me, because, you know, but I'm used to drawing stuff that you can't do in a movie, you know, and that's the fun. I mean, just going overboard like that. And
As opposed to 22 pages in a dime or something.
yeah, and I'm not opposed to talking ahead scenes, but I'm a film buff too, so I love De Niro, Kurosawa, and Lean and stuff, but every time they did talking head scenes, there was a bump, bump, bump or something, some kind of visual key to the scene that made it, like Ron said, not dull. You know, it's not just technically getting the information across, it's trying to create it. You're being paid to be creative to do it. You know, in an
Like,
interesting
that's a
way.
great example though. What, that talking head writer takes the lazy way out, writes mostly dialogue, doesn't really give you much in time in terms of scene direction and action. How do you
Watch Citizen Kane. Look at all the shadows and the walls.
There's only so many turns. You can take the characters around in a circle, but if you're doing that with a plot, then you're in the driver's seat of this. But when you get a full script, the script will dictate, as Ron said earlier, it dictates who's going to talk first. And if the guy's got the double balloon where he's going to say one thing here and then somebody else says something and then his balloon doubles over, you have to plan that. And that dictates how you're setting up the panel.
It's
So
not-
yeah, it limits your
It's
shot.
also your job as a storyteller to make the guy look like he knows what he's doing. I mean, you know, there's some writers that I've actually, you know, I always make it work. But sometimes I might move a panel over the next page if it's on, you know, if I just can't fit it and it just doesn't work for me and the momentum and the timing and the, you know, it's not, even a simple little thing, called a page in Get Mystique where Wolverine's in a car and he's got a C4 explosive strapped to him and he gets blown up into a million bits. But, you know, the kill switch was on the previous page, but I just moved it to the next page because it wouldn't have worked for me visually. Like I sit there and I have those 5 pages on the boards and I actually read it myself as I'm penciling it. I keep reading it visually without words, without anything. And if I can't read it, I just feel like you guys are going to kill it. So there's times I take liberties and I'll move things around, but as long as the integrity of the story is there and the words work, you know, that's the important thing.
It's not as interesting. Are you interested? Yeah,
And then you get bombs in the corner, like, I recently had to do a scene where you had, I think, 6 superheroes in what was described as a very small, dingy, little Miami apartment. And then another villain comes in and they